Hey guys, and welcome to Kachi Bachi. I am Jordan Heyer, and today I am sharing with you one of my absolute favorite tools in my sewing, quilting, long arming arsenal. This is a very simple thing that was shared with me many years ago, and I probably wouldn't want to live without it these days. It's a glue pen, and I know that probably seems really random because I'm not about gluing anything, especially when it comes to like hems and all that stuff. I want things that are gonna last. This helps me make things that will last look really good. It comes from Bowen. There's so many different ones out there. You can use Sewline, there's our pink. This was pretty much the only one that like you could get at a quilt shop back when I got it, and that was probably 7 or 8 years ago now. You can get refills for them. It's a very straightforward. There's nothing special about the glue. It's acid-free glue. It's just like the glue that you would let your kids eat, if you would. Acid-free glue. You can get it at Hobby Lobby. You can get it at the Dollar Tree. Wherever you source it, it's all going to accomplish the same end goal. The reason I like this is honestly because I use it so much. I like having the handhold as opposed to a short little glue stick. And then this does have a finer nib, which allows me for more precision and control as to where I actually put it. Aside from that, there's really not anything spectacular about the item. It's what it does for me that makes me really love it. The very first place I will say that I use it is just in everyday piecing, and that is where it originated for me. A guy named Mr. Bill. He was like the solo lone male in all the quilt guilds in town, retired Army, like captain, very orderly, the most accurate piecer of anyone I've ever seen. And the reason why is he doesn't use straight pins. So I was at his house one day and he was showing me something about something, and we were working with his long arm, and the long and the short of it, he was sitting there piecing and he glued every single seam, every one of them. And he didn't even use this glue. He used a different one that you had to sit there and hold your finger on and wait for it to dry for like 10 seconds, which I was not about. So I did end up going with this guy. But every single seam that he put together was glued before he sewed it, which means they nested perfectly. And it was one of those just like, it clicked in my brain and made sense. And I won't say that I do it for every single seam. I do still pin, just because it's convenient and effective for the most part. This is what I go to when I have either I'm being lazy or I know it's a tricky seam that's gonna wanna slip on me. And it's literally as simple as taking and dabbing my glue and then nestling those seams so that they are exactly perfectly meeting where I want them to. And then that's it. I'll take this to my sewing machine, sew it, and when I turn it out, I have an extremely accurate, perfectly nested seam that's not going to slip when you take a pin out of it. I use this all the time. The next place that I was slightly like, I wouldn't say curious, I was not expecting to see this product used, if you would, was in a class with Sue Daly at Quilt Market. And if you don't know Sue Daly, she's like a guru of English paper piecing. And she doesn't use these. She has her own little plastic templates. It works really great with plastic templates with like the little holes. You can hole punch your own in paper. I just cut this real quick to show you. But she sits on airplanes, in cars, wherever it may be that she's traveling to, from, doctors, wherever. And she will take and just dab a little bit of her paper piecing or her glue onto her paper piece. And then she doesn't baste with needle and thread. She literally will take and put in the 4 corners of her English paper piecing and is gonna flip this over. So I can close this now. She'll sit there and just do this for hours and prep her pieces. So instead of basting, she literally uses a basting glue. And from there, you can take, well, she has a little rotary cutter, and I forgot that step. So we're gonna open this guy back up. Whether you pre-cut your fabric or use AccuQuilt for your fabric cutting, or you use pre-cut 2.5-inch squares, or you cut them with scissors and templates and draw it, however you do your paper piecing, you can use this method, which is awesome. Or you can use needle and thread, it's entirely up to you. I showed my mom this 5 or 6 years ago, I guess it was, and she did a lot of troubleshooting, which I suppose I'm super grateful for, because I found some efficiencies that aren't super efficient through her. But she made a million English paper pasting hexes and wanted to try and save some money on the glue refills, and so she got the Dollar Tree glue sticks, which are fatter. They're like 4 times this diameter, and she tried cutting them into quarters and shoving it down into this little tube, and it took one time of doing that, and then she went out and bought another stick, and she would buy refills pretty much on a weekly basis, because that is not worth it. So either use the glue stick from the dollar store in the container that it came in, or get refills for your glue stick, because just trying to hack that is not worth the hack. And we have my mother to thank for finding that out for us, because I'm sure she's not the only one that tried that or would try that, just to save a few bucks, because hey, what's wrong in being thrifty? But that's that. So it's instantly sticky. You can take and then sew this hexie to your next hexie and then pull your paper out. And you had no basting by hand, which if you have arthritis, it's so much easier. Or just even carpal tunnel, if you have any neuropathy sort of things, this is a very, very effective and much less painful, much less tedious way to make your paper piecing or your English paper piecing. And so that was from Sue Daly. Gotta love her for that one. The next place that I would say that I use this most probably would be in my longarming. Here's the thing. If someone brings me a back that they did not feel the need to spend the amount of time that it takes to press that seam open on the back or press it to the side, whichever they prefer. I will quilt it however they bring it. But if they're not going to take that effort and put that forth in their quilt, then I'm either going to charge them to press that seam, or they'll say, just do it like it is. And it's one of those things I'm not like super keen to do, is just let a quilt back seam flop in like multiple different directions. I can't do it. It drives my OCD insane, but I'm also not going to provide 30, 45 minutes, depending on how many seams are in the back or whatever it may be, or the labor for free, because they simply didn't want to do it. And so that's when I pull out my glue stick. So I'm loading a quilt back that has a seam on it. Ideally, I'll make that seam parallel with the poles on my long arm. And when I do that, when I get to that seam, I'm just going to take a little bit of my glue, dab it under the seam, and make sure that it's all going to lay either open or pressed to whichever direction they would have it pressed. Or sometimes if they have pressed it and it's like flopping up in a weird way, and I don't want it to flop in the other direction, I'm just going to take my glue stick and run it along that seam, and it will hold it in place so that I can long arm it with peace of mind and without wasting my time and not getting paid for their laziness. So that's essentially how I use it in my long arming. Probably so much more often than I do paper piecing even, or I used in my seams probably more than my long arming. But it really depends on the quilt and the person that brought it to me. Another place is if there's a seam that's not sewn well in a quilt, I will use this to tack it down so my foot doesn't get underneath it and cause that seam to open up anymore. And I do tend to, if possible, locate those before it goes on the long arm and then offer that to the quilter or who brought it and say, hey, you can like fix this seam, or I can just glue it and then you could hand sew it whenever it comes off the long arm. And that's oftentimes, depending on where they're coming from, that's what they'll do. And it's really great for that. So I'll just use it to tack down the seam long enough for me to quilt it, and then we'll put a pin in it or a post-it note with a pin identifying where that was so they can go back and fix it at their leisure. It's really great for that though. Simple little things. The last place I use it is in just traditional paper piecing, which is a whole world different from English paper piecing. English paper piecing is typically done by hand. Traditional paper piecing is done on a sewing machine with paper. And this was like probably the fourth, maybe fifth quilt I ever did. It was for my parents, and it is paper pieced. And so you can do things with paper piecing that you would never, ever, ever even try and accomplish outside of paper piecing. So all of my Stars of David and the menorah in the middle were all paper pieced. Thanks to Judy Niemeyer, I have greatly expedited the process and made more accurate my process of paper piecing since I pieced this quilt. What she recommends and requires for any class that you take from her is a glue stick. And the reason being is you literally have to hold this to a piece of paper and you can pin that. When you have little bitty pieces like this though, like a flame, or this was a very narrow piece, to try and pin that accurately where it's not going to shift or where you don't have to remove the pin in the middle of sewing because you're going to end up hitting it, it can get obnoxious. You literally take and dab your water-soluble glue onto the paper. It's going to wash off. You're still going to easily be able to remove your paper, but that holds that piece of fabric to the paper. So then when you go and sew it, it's not shifting around and being all wonky on you. And then when you fold that back, you can just tap it down and it's going to hold it in place for when you sew your next piece and when you sew piece 3 to piece number 4. So it's a very simple little thing. It makes your paper piecing so much more relaxing to me because things aren't shifting around and getting all wonky on you and then you accidentally have to re-sew it. So paper piecing, who knew? A glue stick is phenomenal for it, except Judy Niemeyer and anyone who's ever taken any of her classes. And that is it, guys. This is hands down one of my favorite tools, and I hope you go and grab some for yourself soon. Oh, if you like this and would like to see more random tool tips from us, hit subscribe, check the bell. It'll notify you anytime we have any new videos out, and we will be hopefully sharing more things like this with you in the soon future. In the near future.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.